Hello, Namaskar, and welcome to Talking Point Blank. So, today we are going to talk about something which is very much in news, has been for last 3 years. But I'm not going to talk about it. I have an eminent guest with me, uh, a distinguished fellow from India Foundation, somebody who has been following Northeast, following the eastern borders, following Myanmar. Uh, I would say since they have been out of college. So somebody who is an expert on this domain, on this area. Uh, Ms. Rami Desai, Distinguished Fellow of India Foundation. Ma'am, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking out this time and doing this with me.
Raja, thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be on your show.
I'm honored, ma'am. It's truly my honor. So, I want to begin with, the trouble always comes from the West, but they say the threat is coming from the East. How do you see it building up on the eastern side of our borders?
Nicely put, Raja. I've always said this for a very long time that we've been too focused on the western frontier of our country. I think one of the reasons was because the West was interested in the western frontier of our country. Um, the Northeast has been ignored for a very long time because it was too complex. It's a very, there are 7 states to deal with. We didn't understand the demography. It was just something that didn't hold a place in people's imagination. And now we see that people are taking more of an interest because of the trouble that's brewing around um, the northeastern borders, whether it's Myanmar, whether it's Bangladesh. Um, there's the threat of China. Now people have started taking an interest in it, and I think it's high time that they're doing so because I think we are very close to things becoming far more complicated than we would like it. Of course, I'm sure we talk about this more, but you know that the borders are enormous and they're porous, they are unpluggable. And with conflict going on in a lot of countries around us, the threat is imminent.
So when we talk about Northeast, ma'am, right? Most of the people want to know कि ये threat क्या है. ये जो नॉर्थ ईस्ट में हमने मणिपुर में वी सॉ गोइंग इन अ प्रीटी बैड स्टेट नाउ इट इज स्टेबलाइजिंग ठीक है हमने नागालैंड में बहुत टाइम तक देखा त्रिपुरा इज अनदर वन असम इज अनदर वन बट primarily Manipur, the conflict in Manipur. Is it a tribal conflict? Is it a Hindu Christian conflict? Is it a multi-ethnic conflict? What is this conflict really about, which we have seen brewing in Manipur, especially?
Well, you can look at it from multiple perspectives. No conflict, as you know, Raja, very well, is because of one reason. There are always multiple layers. There's a prolonged emotional sort of process also that goes behind conflict in terms of there's some aspiration that is not being fulfilled, or there are some demands that are not being met, or there are external factors. Manipur, we saw all of this come together, and it became the kind of explosive situation that we saw it become. Of course, it is on one hand a tribal, non tribal issue because uh, the conflict did start with the demand for a scheduled tribe status by the Metis community, which was then confronted by the Kuki community, who didn't feel that the Metis should have demanded for a scheduled tribe status, or a scheduled tribe status should not be given to them. Of course, this came after a High Court order which recommended to the state government that it may be looked into the demand for a scheduled tribe status, and this also happened. This is not something that this demand is not new. This demand has been there for a very long time. I think they had filed for this demand maybe in 2015. It just so happened that it came up, and the High Court gave this recommendation to the state government. But again, it was very peculiar in the sense that that the state government alone cannot fulfill that demand. It's a very long process. To get a scheduled tribe status, it has to go through the NCST, it has to go through the TRI, so on and so forth. It takes years, if not decades. So this was, I think, reaction that was not preempted, that it would be such a harsh reaction. But of course, there have been historical legacied reasons for this sort of discomfort between communities. And I'm choosing my words very carefully here, because even though um, violence has come down in Manipur, things are still hot in terms of that there is mistrust between communities. Um, and there isn't the kind of comfort that they share with each other that they shared before the conflict, even though it wasn't 100% comfort, but there was still some meeting point. That meeting point has disappeared and they haven't been able to bring it back. So I think it was a tribal non-tribal issue. You know the case very well in terms of the fact that there was the Metis asked for this demand because they felt that they only were a part of 10% of the land, and the scheduled tribe land was 90%. And 10% here, I say with caution, because if you actually remove the highways, the water bodies, it's probably only 7%. But, their population is more or less a little bit more than the tribal population in the state. So I think there is an insecurity because of that. That is why the demand was made. There are also benefits that you get with having a scheduled tribe status, reservations, income tax exemption. So obviously that is very, that seems like a really good deal. And I believe that everybody has the opportunity in this country to demand. Whether they get it or not is dependent on the processes that are laid down for these demands. So, of course, they were well within their rights to demand it for whatever their anxieties were, like I said, land being one of them. Now, when it comes to the religious issue, right at the outset, it wasn't a religious issue.
It was.
It wasn't.
It wasn't.
But because there are so many factors involved in it, including external factors that manipulate uh, fault lines, that we did see it become one to a certain extent. Um, but let me say this, that right at the outset, when the conflict broke out, people were really quick to jump the gun, saying that, oh, this is because of religion, this is because of religion, because it's not just a Hindu Christian thing. It can't be, because the Metis are not one homogeneous group.
Right.
You have Hindus, you have Muslims, you have Christians, you have Sanamahis, which is their, indigenous faith. Amongst the cookies, of course, they're majority Christian. But what happens is international, and please allow me a minute here, an international, the international world loves to see any conflict in India from the lens of a religious conflict. It works for them. That's why the Americans, the European Union was so quick to label this as an attack on the minorities,
Especially the Christians.
especially the Christians. And again, in a state like Manipur, what is a minority?
How do you define minority?
How do you define a minority? Who isn't a minority?
Mm-hmm.
Are the Metis who follow Sanamaism not minorities? Are the cookies who follow Christianity not the majority? I mean, I'm just saying, how do you define it? By population? By religion? Whatever you're defining it by, the lens doesn't fit in Manipur. Um, the cookies is one tribal group. There are the Nagas also. That's what makes actually Manipur a very special case, because it's not just two communities that live there. There are multiple communities that live there. Manipur's also been our gateway to the rest of Southeast Asia. Therefore, on the borders, you'll find a lot of uh, a lot of communities from other parts of India who have been there for generations to do business. So we saw the European Union file an emergency resolution on Manipur, saying that, oh, this is the government must intervene, do something, this conflict. I looked at each and every person who was a representative of the European Union, member of the European Union, um, a member of the European Parliament. I looked at their background just to check, do they have any expertise on India? Do they have any expertise on the Northeast? Do they have any expertise on tribal politics, affairs,
Mhm.
nothing. Most of them,
It's
like
pretty much what we have seen in Kashmir, we have seen in Punjab.
we've seen
So
it. It's the
same modus
same.
operandi.
It's the same modus operandi. India, they want to defame India on the basis of the fact that for some reason, the majority, which is usually the Hindus, are oppressing everybody else, so on and so forth. So it became a religious issue because people wanted to use that lens. And then later on, within also, we have to learn to blame ourselves also for things that we do. People actively went to these organizations with their,
Hmm.
with their appeals. There were appeals to intervene in the United Nations, the European Parliament. Why would you go to institutions that anyway hold no power in this day and age, where the question of their existence, is now murky? Why do they exist? Whether they'll exist in another 50 years is also a big question mark. Why would you go there when they have no expertise and expect a third party like that to intervene? So people also did that. Communities also manipulated it. They manipulated them back, and therefore it became an issue.
Do you think this was being planned for a very long time by the external forces? Because I'll tell you something, when the trouble brewed, the way it escalated, especially the kind of weapons we saw, the cookies using, and then the Metis also having some, but predominantly we saw on the cookie side, they have those American made weapons, rocket launchers as well. Do you think they were prepping up for something like this? They were looking for an excuse to, create something in Manipur. And why only Manipur? Why not Nagaland?
Look, I will have to say that initially when this happened, I was like, let's just look at the conflict just the way it is. Let's not try to read too much into it. Let's not speculate. But I think over a period of time, what became clear is the kind of clash that happened and how instantaneously it happened after after the order was passed. It seemed like it was a little bit pre-planned. And I wouldn't be surprised, because over a period of time, we've also seen many other things come to light, whether it was Sheikh Hasina's statement saying, the West was interested in a Christian state. I'm not saying that this was really a conflict based
Further.
on that. I'm not saying that. But of course, there'd be enough external actors to be able to support you.
Hmm.
And like you said, the weapons and this. See, the thing about weapons is that because there has been this a prolonged period of time where conflict has been a part of these borders, the supply chain of weapons and people using them, or this ability to activate yourself, is fairly quick. So I think that has always been there, and I think that'll continue to be there as things escalate in Myanmar. We are also seeing now the ethnic armed organizations across the border using really sophisticated weapons, using drone technology, which we saw in Manipur
Yeah.
as well, being used rampantly. So I think as this also becomes, technology also becomes more accessible, you can find paths, you can build drones yourself, and the kind of insurgents that you have now, or um, the kind of militia groups you have now, they're not any longer run by illiterate people. You have leadership that's educated, that is very politically savvy, that has a grip on geopolitics, strategy, and they come from an educated background of engineers or
Mhm.
technicians, so they can do all of this. So I think when we look at this sort of exchange, I think that's always been there, and that'll continue to be there, and we'll see more and more of it if we don't.